Welcome to our number 5 in the series of 6 financial literacy workshops. We are today talking on creating a great game plan for an emergency reserve. My name is Dr. Pamela Ravar-Jones. I am serving as the moderator for today. I am the Assistant Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Baton Rouge and have the privilege to serve under the leadership of Mayor Sharon Weston Broome. Today, we have a great lineup for you, a number of partners that are with us, and I'd like to begin by getting into the premise of what these workshops are all about. So our first slide talks about April being Financial Literacy Month, and we've talked about this on each of the series, but I want to just make this personal for a moment to our audience by continuing to emphasize the need to understand what financial wellness truly looks like to you. That's one of the major responsibilities during our Financial Literacy Month workshops is we want to ask our audience to take this knowledge, this information we're sharing, and really make it applicable to your own financial stories at this time. The idea of financial wellness is all about feeling secure, both in the short term and in the long term. And that means after COVID is finished, developing these new financial habits for yourselves in order to get in a much better light for yourselves and with your spending. And so there was a survey that was done, and this was by NEFE, and I shared some information on Series 4 with this, but I want to give you some more survey results. 3/4 of Americans say that they're taking steps to adjust their finances due to the COVID outbreak that's occurred. And here's some statistics. So 2 in 5 note that they've cut their expenses. 26% are putting off major financial decisions. That means whether buying a home, investing in a new car, and so forth. And then 22% of the survey participants have increased their contributions towards savings. And I'm excited about this number because this is all about what we're talking about today, is really looking at a deeper dive of savings and being able to contribute to a what I would call a nest for yourself, an area where you have reserve for those emergencies. This last bullet on the slide is about financial literacy. It can't predict or remedy the crisis that we're in, but knowledge is indeed power, as I said, and it plays a pivotal role in the economic recovery of our country, and particularly to the Baton Rouge community that we're serving with this information. So our next slide. Welcome again, especially to our online audience and to those who are watching us on live streaming with Facebook. I want to reiterate that the purpose of these workshops are twofold. The first is to aid in building awareness about the importance of financial literacy. And as I said, April is the month of financial literacy. But secondly, we want to discuss the need for effective financial education. And that was the whole impetus of starting these because of the federal stimulus checks that were rolled out to the public. And many people are beginning to see those checks come in. This particular workshop has 3 general focuses. And the first one is we aim to provide information on how to prepare for financial emergencies and to establish savings goals. The second is to address the necessary steps, so the process that you would take to prioritize, to build, and then to manage this emergency reserve. And then finally, our third goal is to discuss ways to identify liquid assets to replenish in this emergency reserve after the crisis. So that's to make this lifestyle now sustainable for you long term. So let's go to our next slide. So as I mentioned, today is filled. We have a packed agenda, but there's so much information that's rich here that we want to be able to provide. Our workshop content, I'm excited. We have a special guest speaker, CEO and President of Capital Area United Way. Part 2 of our presentation is all about the savings process. Part 3, we will discuss optimizing budgets for savings. We'll talk about liquid assets, identify what liquidity means, and so forth. Part 4 is about the role of advisors and counselors in savings and getting that support help that's necessary. And then we will go into our final portion of question and answers, and we'll touch on that. And all of our panelists will remain on the line to be able to answer any questions. I do want to remind our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to make notes of those in the chat room in the Q&A section on the side. So with that being said, I'd like to begin the introduction of our special guest speaker. So Mr. George Bell is President and CEO of Capital Area United Way. George is an accomplished nonprofit executive and Louisiana native. We have the pleasure of having had George to serve on previous webinars that I've hosted, and George recently retired from the healthcare executive area. He's had 30 years of progressive management work experience in physician practice management, business development, and hospital administration. In addition to that, George is active in the Baton Rouge community and has a love for music. I've had a chance to witness some of his performances, but George has maintained a presence in the community and serving and helping through his role as CEO and president of United Way, and has an incredible program entitled Alice. And so I want to welcome you, George, to the presentation, to our series, and I look forward to the content that you'll share, explaining what Alice is, talking about the many faces of Alice, and then also moving beyond Alice. Welcome, George.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. First of all, let me just extend my gratitude to you for inviting me to be a part of this, and also for taking this on, because this is very important information that our community needs, especially in a time like this. So I'm grateful to be here. First, let me say a little bit about Capital Area United Way and our rich presence in this community. This is an organization that has been in the Baton Rouge community for over 95 years now. And I was not as familiar with the organization before I joined, but now that I've had a chance to become a part of it, I've just been in awe over the stability of the organization and its commitment to this community. We recently took a look back to see how what that's looked like, and over the last 30 years, Capital Area United Way has invested over $230 million in our community. So I'm honored to be a part of this organization, and to be in a role that allows us to touch in a positive way so many lives in our 10 parish area. So let's talk about Alice. And for years and decades, when it came to looking at the needs of communities, a lot of emphasis and focus was placed on poverty and the needs of those that are in poverty. And often, it was looked at as poverty, or those that are in poverty, or a finite, stagnant group of individuals who have chronically been in that place. But there was very little consideration to how people move in and out of poverty. So almost 10 years ago, United Ways across the country started looking at this issue and convened a series of research that took a look at what is not just poverty, but what are the issues that affect people moving in and out of poverty, specifically the working, what they call the working poor. So they created a term called ALICE, And ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. So how do you determine if a person is in ALICE? Well, one thing they did was they took a look at the cost, the basic household survival budget, those basic essential things that a household needs in order to survive in today's economy. And those items are housing, childcare, food, transportation, healthcare, and technology. And the feeling was that if at the very least a household has to be able to cover and have enough to cover those basic expenses. The other thing they looked at was, okay, if there are averages that each community has for these expenses, then how much does a person have to make to cover those basic expenses? And that's where they looked at average income levels across different regions and different areas. Thus, the name Alice. And the thought was, if you are able to make enough to cover those basic household survival items or expenses, then you were not in Alice. But if you don't make enough to cover, and that's where the alarming data came across, that if you take East Baton Rouge Parish, we are at 47% Alice, which means almost 1 out of 2 people in our community does not make enough to cover their basic needs. Now, in the 10 parish area that we serve, that number drops to about 45%, but it's still a high number when you look at those that are working, showing up every day, doing all the things that they or that they can to make ends meet, but still coming up short. The other thing that's common among ALICE participants is that they have very little savings. They have less than $400 in the bank. So any one incident, a sick child, heaven forbid, a work stoppage, or a broken car, things like that, or a pandemic like we're in right now, can take a person who is in ALICE and put them in poverty real fast. So, armed with this information, United Way, and especially in our region, made a serious change. We went from a system of just providing funds to nonprofit organizations based on their status as a nonprofit. We started looking at, okay, if ALICE is a compilation of the most vulnerable people in our communities, how can we impact that community? So we started looking for, in addition to the kinds of programs that meet basic needs, we started looking at how can United Way invest in programs that are going to help those folks that are working but still unable to meet those needs. And among the things we came up with, one of the best I've come up with, not me, but the organizations come up with, is the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. This is a program that takes a look at, that provides free professional tax preparation services to those that are working and that make less than about $60,000 a year per household. That to me is something that provides a major benefit to those folks who, for 2 reasons. One, it first of all gives you something that is of value that you don't have to pay for. Number 2, it also gives you the opportunity to avoid some of the pitfalls of maybe seeking a loan, a high interest loan, in order to get an advance payment on a tax refund that you're anticipating. Those 2 things have really allowed us to help Alice residents save a lot of money. Just to put it in perspective for you, last year, through the tax returns that we prepared for over 7,000 tax recipients, we generated over $9 million of revenue that came back into our community in the form of tax refunds. So it's a major, impactful program that is continuing to pay off. Now, unfortunately, during this time frame, we have had to suspend doing face-to-face tax preparation, but we look forward to being able to get back into offering those services to our citizens. So that's the Alice population in our area. If you find yourself in Alice, if you find yourself, as someone who is working paycheck to paycheck, is not able to get out of, can't get, past the status or where you are, how can you move out of it? Well, I think the very fact that you're on this webinar, the fact that you are seeking information and trying to become educated on those things that can help you is a great start. I've always said that the thing that separates those people that are successful and those that are that remain stagnant is their access to the right information, and then their willingness to do whatever is required to change and to put themselves on a better path. So the fact that you're here, the fact that you're hearing from some quality speakers who are going to share their insights on how you can move from current state to future state is an important step on your part. So I commend you for that. I'm going to share just a story about when I moved to Baton Rouge from Ohio. I came here to work for what was a startup company, and that company, was well positioned to be a major player in Medicaid managed care. Well, after 18 months of unsuccessfully pursuing that, in the last 9 months, we were still hopeful, but we were running out of money. So I actually spent the next 9 months, or the last 9 months of my tenure with that company, in Alice, deeply in Alice, and on the brink of poverty. And so a couple of things really stood out. One is when you are in a situation where you have limited funds coming in, every dollar matters. You have to take a look at, I once heard it said that it's not what you make, it's what you spend. So we really had to look at what we were spending, look at every dollar that was coming in, and make a decision as to whether it was a want or a need when it came down to spending it. Second thing is, when you start doing that, you realize that there's a lot that comes into your household that you're either spending unnecessarily or without a clear purpose behind it. The other thing that you want to do is you want to surround yourself with people who are able to help you grow and in your knowledge of how to be a good manager of money. Oftentimes we major in the minors and minor in the major things. And if we just take the time to seek out those resources, seek out those individuals, seek out those programs that are able to help you navigate, especially those tough times like we're in right now, you'll be amazed at what's available out there. But it's a matter of kind of turning off the television sometimes and not being concerned about who the latest, housewife of Atlanta, what they're doing, and start focusing on kind of what's my household and how can I help improve my household. So I just share that with you. And again, being on this call you're going to be on this webinar, you're going to be exposed to some folks who can shed light on not only what to do, but provide resources for you on how to do it. The last thing I'll leave you with is just know that what we're going through right now is temporary. What you're going through and what you may be experiencing, and what may have been the reality for you for years, is only temporary. And it with the right steps, following the right process, the right directions, you can move out of that situation that you're in. And again, anything that we can do to help shed light on it, and what you can do, I'm more than happy to offer those resources to you. I'm going to stop right there and open the floor for questions.
George, thank you so much for that information and for making it personal by sharing your own information and testimony to what you call Alice. And just in part of the dialogue we were having yesterday, and we were saying Alice is not about a poverty situation. Would it be fair to say that Alice is a circumstance or a condition that a person finds themselves in at a certain period in their financial aspects of their life? How would you explain that?
Yeah, it is. It's not a sentence. It's not a it's a snapshot in time. And people move in and out of it if they follow the right processes and follow some of the advice that's being provided for you today. And it starts with, again, looking at what's coming in and what you're spending, and then looking at creating a passion for saving. A lot of people challenge, well, I don't make enough to save, but you have to figure out a way to start paying yourself first and building your and a little goes a long way. It's not that you have to start off with an enormous amount of money. It's just you need to get in the habit of doing that so that you build your muscle for saving. And once you start doing it, you'll see how it can grow.
Excellent. So I have a two-part question for you, George. And the question is, what role does work choices that individuals make, in addition to changes in spending patterns, play in changing financial conditions?
So you just hit the two major areas. Work, meaning, the job or the place you go to generate income for your household. Now, many folks are in positions that pay them, at a certain level, and if they are, if they're interested in going beyond that level, they have to do one of two things. They have to figure out where and how to advance in the roles that they're in, or how to use the experience that they have to get to a higher level of responsibility and role. I will tell you this, and I coach people all the time, mentor people all the time. I encourage folks to find what they are good at doing, what they enjoy doing, and what they believe God has called them to do. When you're able to lock in on those things, then your ability, your potential for growing and excelling in those things you're doing is greater. And I have countless examples of people that I've both hired as well as people that I've mentored who found themselves in roles that they were in jobs, but they were not aligned with their best skills and their passion. When they found something that was that they were passionate about and that they were good at doing, they were willing to learn more about it, number one, and they were willing to put in the effort and the time to grow beyond just doing what they needed to keep a job, and they were able to add value that was then later recognized by the organizations that employed them. So that's one thing. The other thing is, maybe you don't have that ability to change jobs or to get into something, but you have time. And if you take time, I know people, I know musicians that are good musicians, but they have, um, they do something else to kind of pay the bills while they work on their craft and work on their pathway as a musician. In a lot of ways, that's kind of what I've done, but I always realize that my real passion is not just music. It's as a leader and as a facilitator and as a developer of people. So my ultimate calling has been, that as a leader of people in diverse organizations. So I was able to do that professionally, but I've also been able to do that with something that I was passionate about as well in music.
George, I want to switch just for a moment, but I'm piggybacking off of a word that you used, and you talked about responsibility. So quite often we hear that the previous generation or the current generation has a responsibility to educate the current or the younger generation on how to manage money. There's this concept that talks about being able to buy something doesn't always mean being able to afford something. What would you say to the current generation who perhaps has not educated themselves enough to truly understand how to spend within their means and not just what they want to buy?
Well, okay, that's a good question.
That's a loaded question, I know.
That's a loaded question. So here's my take on that. I would say that this generation has been afforded a lot of privileges and benefits that previous generations may not have had. The fact that they grew up with, you know, the best, or should say, expensive tennis shoes. Back in my day, and I'm sounding like one of those old guys, $10 pair of tennis shoes was the norm, and we were happy with them because that everybody had them. Now there's you're not somebody unless you have the latest Jordans, or and that was not as much or big of an issue when I was growing up. So now you have a generation of folks that have grown up with occasionally having nice things and a appetite for nice things. You have to reach a point where you have to realize that, okay, those nice things were nice, but now that I'm at a point of responsibility, especially for my own personal finances, I have to be willing to make choices that are going to align with my long-term goals of financial independence, and not be susceptible to the immediate gratification of a pair of tennis shoes that may, or whatever it is. That's the thing I try and instill in younger folks now. I have grandkids, and they've been quite blessed. But I also try to instill in them the need to save for the things that you really want, and the feeling of taking your own money and being able to buy, if that's what you want, then yeah, you can buy it with your money. And so it's a delicate balancing act, but for adults, for grown folks who have mortgages and rent and things like that, you really have to have that discipline to look at what's the difference between a want and a need.
George, thank you so much for the dialogue, for the rich information about the ALICE program. I hope you can stick around for any other questions at the end. At this time, we're going to move into our partner discussions. And we'll go to the next slide that's here. I want to share our presenting partners who will be with us. We have America Saves, Ms. Carolyn Pemberton, who is a Senior Program Manager for Workplace Savings Programs. Also, our continued partner, Louisiana Jumpstart, Jessica Sharon, along with Brandon Kelly, Claire Loop, and Paula Dawson are with us today. Mid-City will be our final presenter, Mid-City Redevelopment Alliance, and Mr. John Carpenter will be presenting information on behalf of Mid-City. So without further ado, we're going to jump into some of this rich dialogue and kind of piggyback off of some of the points that Mr. Bell touched on, specifically talking about how do you even start a savings account in this premise, this process of savings. So I would like to welcome Carolyn Pemberton, who is with America Saves. Carolyn, thank you for being with us, and I will turn the slides over to you.
Great. Thank you, Paula, for having me here today to talk about emergency savings. I'm very glad to be a part of this conversation. America Saves is the leading voice on saving, encouraging individuals to save money to help them reduce debt and to build wealth. The information that I'm going to be sharing today will hopefully help you develop successful strategies to save, particularly to save for emergencies. And these can apply to you whether you are new to savings or you've already been saving for years. So let me give you just a little bit of background information about America Saves. As I said, we are a campaign to motivate and encourage people to save effectively in order to reduce debt and build wealth. The foundation of our work is the use of the America Saves Pledge. And the America Saves Pledge is a simple saving plan. When you take the America Saves Pledge, you select a savings goal and you make a commitment to yourself to reach that goal. After taking the America Saves Pledge, you begin to receive ongoing support and communication from America Saves in order to help you reach your specific goal. Since 1991, more than 800,000 individuals have taken the America Saves Pledge. Next slide, please. So saving for emergencies, having an emergency savings account is really an important part of being prepared when emergencies happen. And it's not a question of if an emergency is going to happen, it's a question of when. They happen to all of us. And there is some peace of mind knowing that we have financial resources to fall back on in situations such as a loss of income, natural disasters, and even unexpected expenses such as car and home repairs. Without emergency savings, we find individuals are more likely to resort to high-cost loans, such as payday loans, or to use credit cards and then incur finance charges and fees if the balances are not paid off in 30 days. Having emergency savings can help you reduce or eliminate your reliance on these types of options. So if you're wondering what exactly an emergency fund consists of, typically it consists of at least $500 in a savings account that you can access without fees or penalties. Saving for this type of fund usually starts with small, and I mean even $10 or $20 a month, regularly scheduled automatic contributions that build up over time. In a few minutes, I'll talk more about automatic savings. The current COVID-19 situation is a prime example of the importance of having emergency cash reserves. Research has shown that low-income families with even $500 in emergency savings are better off financially than moderate-income families with less than this in savings. So maintaining an emergency savings account may be the most important difference between those who manage to stay afloat and those who acquire debt. And once you have saved $500 or maybe even $1,000 in an emergency account, you can then begin to work toward the next level of being able to cover 1 or more months of essential expenses. It's also important to remember that when you do have an emergency savings account and an emergency occurs, like the COVID-19 situation, you should not hesitate to use that money. You've worked hard to save that money, and it's there, excuse me, and it's there to be used when emergencies happen. And again, this COVID-19 situation is a perfect example of the type of emergency that is needed, that when you have happen, you can turn to your emergency funds. Next slide, please. So figuring out how much you can afford to save. The first step really is looking at your budget, and you'll most likely need to determine this in order to figure out how much money you can save monthly. A good way to start is to keep track of what you spend on both essential and non-essential items. And also looking at how you pay for items, because we use all different kinds of methods to pay for our expenses: cash, credit, debit, and auto pay. So it's important to be sure to capture all of your spending by looking at all of these different ways that you can spend in order to get a complete picture. There are many free digital tools available that you can use to help you track your money to see where it's going each month, or you can simply do the old-fashioned way of writing everything down on paper for a couple of months to get a sense of where your money is going. Once you've captured all of your spending, you can divide it into larger categories such as housing, food, utilities, shopping, and everything else. You can go back to the previous slide still. Once you know where your money is actually going, you want to then ask yourself if your money is going where you want it to go and where you think it should go. Using this information can help you create a realistic budget that you can stick to. There doesn't make much sense to create goals within your budget that you really don't have the ability to meet. So be realistic when you set your budget goals. If you're not currently saving, then this information about your budget will help you look for areas where you may be able to reduce spending in order to find money to save. If you are currently saving, you may be able to find additional ways to increase the amount you're saving. And America Saves has a special blog article on our website at americasaves.org entitled 54 Ways to Save that may be a useful resource for you. So once you know how much you can realistically save each month, you can calculate how long you will need to save in order to reach your emergency fund goal. Next slide. So we know also that people who have a plan for saving money are more successful than those who save without a plan. And it doesn't have to be a complicated plan. A simple one works just as well. The America Saves Pledge is one such simple plan, and it consists of 3 steps that you take online at americasaves.org. And at America Saves, we believe in the start small, think big strategy. When you start working toward a new savings goal, you have a greater chance of being successful if you start with a small monthly amount, get comfortable with that amount, and then work to increase the amount you are saving each month. If you are just now beginning to establish an emergency savings fund, start with $500 as your goal. This amount gives you a cushion and can be very helpful in many circumstances. Once you have this amount, then you can work to the next level, which could be $1,000. And then from there, you can set another goal of looking to cover 1 month of your essential expenses. And then after that, you build on by accumulating enough emergency funds to cover multiple months of essential living expenses. Many people believe that having 3 months of living expenses is a secure place to be with your emergency savings. And that amount can seem very, very intimidating for many of us. So America Saves encourages you to focus on the intermediate steps, that first $500 and then the next $500 and so on, so that you can celebrate your successes along the way. The next step in your saving plan is to decide when you want to reach your goal. So if you decide you want to have that first $500 in emergency savings by the end of the year, then you need to figure out how much you'll be saving each month to reach that goal in order to get there by the end of the year. And the last question to ask yourself is, are you able to save more in order to get to your goal faster? Next slide, please. So we've talked up until this point about the need to have emergency savings and the need to have a plan in order to save successfully. The other important element of successful savings is to save automatically. Again, research has shown that automatic savings in particular has proven to be the most effective way to save. And automatic savings means you have a process in place to save at regular intervals, whether that's monthly, weekly, or daily. This is something that you can strive for when you're back in a stable financial situation if you find that right now you are in an emergency situation. The appeal of saving automatically is also the old concept of set it and forget it. Once you set it up, you don't have to do anything else in order to save. However, you do have control over it. You can change the amount, the timing at any time because it's your system that you've set up. But small, regularly scheduled automatic deposits do build up over time. For example, $50 a month accumulates to $600 in a year, and after 5 years, it accumulates to $3,000, plus any interest that has compounded. So again, it's that start small, think big concept. And also with automatic savings, when a situation arises that requires you to use your savings, you'll be replenishing your savings at the same time you made a withdrawal to use it. You'll always be in that process of saving, even if you are using your savings for an emergency. However, if your emergency situation is something like the current COVID situation and you've had an income loss and you really can't afford to have that automatic savings, again, you can put a pause on it and resume that when your situation improves. So the three main strategies for automatic savings are, the first one is if you are paid by direct deposit at your place of employment. So you can instruct your employer to transfer a certain amount of money from each paycheck into a separate savings account. All you have to do is provide your employer with the amount of money you want to save each paycheck and your account information. With this information, your employer will take care of setting up the automatic transfer. Another strategy is to have your bank or credit union transfer a fixed amount from your checking account into a savings account every payday. This can be set up whether your paycheck is directly deposited by your employer or you manually deposit your paycheck. You simply tell your financial institution how much money you want to transfer from your checking account into a savings account, and they will set it up. The last strategy is for you to choose a day of the month or a regular interval, such as every 2 weeks, to transfer a predetermined amount of money from your checking account into a savings account. This is a recommended strategy if you have inconsistent income or if you access your pay frequently. Again, you set up the process with your bank or credit union. And one final point to consider if you use this strategy is to pick a time of the month when other automatic payments aren't occurring or you're not having to pay other bills. So finally, at America Saves, we recognize that some people are still in the portion of their savings journey where they are reducing debt. And we consider reducing debt as a form of saving. So once you've reduced your debt, you hopefully will find that you have more ability to save by putting money away automatically into a designated savings account. Next slide. Oops, sorry, oh, there we go. Again, we encourage you to go to americasaves.org to take the America Saves Pledge, join our community of savers, and receive ongoing support to reach your goal. We also have a lot of other financial tips and information available on our website, and on our social media sites. And we look forward to supporting you in your savings goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that information. I love what you shared about the pledge, and we certainly ask for individuals to go to the website and to take that pledge and to become committed to being an individual that will save. We'll come back to you, Carolyn, for more information in terms of question and answer to at the end. But let's now get into another one of our partner presentations, and that is Louisiana Jumpstart. We have Brandon Kelly from Home Bank, Claire Loop with the Federal Reserve. Thank you, Claire, for being back. And also Paula Dawson, with Junior Achievements. So thank you all for being with us. And Jessica Sharon will be also commenting at the end. So I will turn this over now to Brandon Kelly. Thank you, Brandon. Brandon, we're having a little bit of problem with your Brandon, can you hear me?
We gotta find a place where we can actually put those dollars. So you're looking at is, do I put it? Yes. I can you absolutely. Okay, let's try.
There's a little bit of trouble with trying to get you in.
Okay, Dr. Pamela, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so I think the first thing that we're always looking for is we want to find somewhere to put our savings account that's going to be one, safe. We need something that's going to be liquid, that we have good access to it, but we also want to find something that's going to on those funds. So the first thing you're going to look at is the liquidity. What does a liquid asset, what does that mean? We've heard that a million times. So I guess it's kind of like this. Let's say I have $1. If I have this dollar, and let's say I have a glass of water. Of course, if I need access to this dollar, and if I put it in a glass of water, and I can easily take that dollar out of that glass of water, it's easy to do. Let's say I had a ice melt around it. It makes it a lot less easy to get access to that dollar. So it's the same way that this works the same way when it comes to the investment vehicle that you're planning to put your money. You want to find one generally that meets your goals, but is also going to be liquid, or you have easier access to it. So let's look at the different options of liquidity in assets. Of course, a checking account. That's probably the most liquid asset, because you can get funds out of that account using your debit card, going to an ATM, going to any bank, talking to a teller, or using checks. You always have access to your money. So it is a very liquid asset. A savings account is also a liquid asset, because you can always get those funds. Now, it's a little less liquid than a checking account, because various banks have different rules and regulations on how you can act. Every amount over the course of a month. So is essentially a month, and sometimes there's a debit card with it, but you get a higher interest rate than some other investment vehicles. But keep in mind that this account, you may have a higher monthly minimum balance, and there may be maintenance fees that are associated with it. So you have to make those decisions. A certificate of deposit, or a CD, if you or some credit unions call it a share certificate, but a CD, or a certificate of deposit, is pretty much a product that a financial institution offers, that you get an interest rate premium, or you get a higher interest rate, but you do that in exchange for saying, okay, I have this lump sum of money. I'm going to leave it untouched for a predetermined period of time. So it's important to know that, again, a CD is not super liquid, because I can't, because one, if I do ask that money back, fee reduction, and it's definitely less liquid. Then you have mutual funds. Mutual fund is a type of financial vehicle that essentially it's a pool of money. So you and a number of other people have all put in money, and that money is managed by an organization or an entity, and they invest it in a number of stocks and bonds. Other assets, so it's spread. It is. You can always try to sell a mutual fund, but if it's not being very successful, you're going to have a hard time selling it. And if you do sell it, you may have a loss. But if that mutual fund is doing well and it's being successful, there'll be an increase in it. So that's another option. You have stocks, which again, that's your owner. You actually own a share or a portion of a corporation. Again, stocks go up, stocks go down. So there are many stocks right now that are worthless, but there are many stocks like Apple or Disney that are doing great. To sell a loan to a company or government entity. A savings bond is a bond that the investor pays a fixed there's a fixed rate of return, and there's a time period that you have before you can actually utilize that money. So that's always again, that's another option, but again, less liquid, because you make those agreements that you won't access those funds, and again, if you access those funds, it will be more expensive. So going to the next slide, we're now going to talk about just how are ways that we can replenish our emergency fund after a crisis. I think the first thing, and Carolyn did a great job from America Saves on that topic, but I think the first thing is you've got to set a goal. The old adage says, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. So you have to put together a goal for yourself. I always like to say you want a SMART goal, and SMART, S-M-A-R-T, it stands for, you need a goal that is specific, that you want it's got to be a specific number, and the M is measurable. So you've got to have some type of measurement. So a good goal would be to save $500. That's a great goal because it's very specific and it's measurable, because if you only save $499, you've missed your goal by $1. A is attainable, and R is realistic. So again, you want a goal that you can actually obtain, and you can actually get to the finish line in a reasonable amount of time. If my goal is to save $100,000, that's not gonna work for me. I'm not gonna get to that at any reasonable amount of time. So you've got to be something that's attainable and realistic for your financial situation. And finally, you want something that's time limited, that you have a time. So a great goal would be to save $500 in the next 6 months, or by September the 3rd. That is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time limited goal. transfer. I think again, the whole set it and forget it. You set that every paycheck you want X amount of dollars to be taken out of your account and moved into a savings account. I'll say this, I'm all of the adage that money that you don't see, you don't spend. So if you're trying to save money within your checking account, you're going to see it and you're going to spend it. So it's important that you move that to a savings account. So because again, if you don't see it, if it's somewhere that you don't have easy access to, you're not going to spend it, and that money is going to grow. And of course, we know that the joy of compounding interest is really great. Again, you want to make it a habit every paycheck that you're moving that money over, but you're monitoring your savings as well. You're going back to those goals and you're seeing how you're doing on those goals. That's going to be really critical, because again, that's how you get those great pats on the back. And that's how you know, hey, I'm on track. I'm doing what I need to do, and I'm going to get to that September goal in time, and I'm going to be very happy and excited for myself in doing so. And finally, you want to use the great local resources. I'll just say this, George Bell and his team at Capital United Way have a great system, 211. It's probably one of the most underutilized resources Baton Rouge has to offer, but it has some great resources for you. There's a great program called Bank on Baton Rouge that has an opportunity if you ask, go to 211 and find out there that are online with Bank on Baton Rouge. And there's a lot of other opportunities that you can use utilizing 211 and their great services. So it's really important to follow those steps as you're making progress to strong, lasting, and there when you need it emergency fund. I'll pass it over to our next presenter.
Thank you, Brandon, for that information. There was a bit of a technical glitch on your end, but we hope that for the Q&A that we can get that worked out. But we will move on in the presentation. I'm excited to have Claire Luke back here with us again. She is the Senior Education Program Manager for the New Orleans branch of Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Thank you, Claire, for being with us today, and I will turn it over to you, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here. And before I begin, I just need to say my regular disclaimer that my comments today are mine and they're not representative of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta or the Federal Reserve System. And with that, I'd like you to move on with a couple of comments that many of which have already been stated. And I just want to put my personal spin on those. As we move to the next slide, I would appreciate it. Thank you. Now, there's a lot of words on here, so I please excuse it, but hopefully you can take a look at the slides as we're talking through these. And what we're going to talk about today is finding ways to optimize your budget, to make adjustments to our budget to make sure that we can include savings. And just a real quick repeat, we said that, in earlier sessions or in earlier speakers this morning, was that your saving is a short-term commitment. That's what we're talking about here. And, I like to look at saving and investing separately. We're not talking about the money you're putting away for your long-term future. This is stuff that you might need now. It might need it for a known future expense, school books, school uniforms, or maybe new tires or some other larger payment. And also for unplanned or unexpected expenses. As we go through these quick steps, I want you to keep in mind two important things. First off, personal finance is personal. So what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa. The other thing that we want to keep focus on is as we prepare to develop and build our savings or an emergency savings, the idea is that a financial emergency or financial disaster can happen anytime, anywhere, and at a variety of levels. In some cases, it might be something very large, like a serious illness or a job loss or death that may cause someone financial stress. It could simply be this pandemic situation where we're temporarily furloughed, and maybe that's a temporary bump in our income, or it could be just something completely unexpected, like my car died. So our degrees of comfort in what is appropriate for us to save or to put away varies, but the important thing is let's save something. The other thing I wanted to specify here is that a savings account protects the funds that we accumulate. I always like to think of my savings account as another way of putting a jar in the closet, and I'm putting my money in there, and I just keep adding and adding and adding. And as Brandon mentioned, you can't save in your checking account. That's like trying to save inside your wallet. We need to look for opportunities to put the money away, out of sight, out of mind, but there and available when we need it. Brandon gave a good explanation about liquidity. I also want to add one more thing to that is easy access to funds also means easy access to funds. Where and how quickly can I get my money? Is my money's in a banking location that has easy, readily available ATMs? Do they have window hours? How do I get my money in emergency? And that's one more thing to consider. Let's go to the next slide, please. I like to kind of think of my savings plan or my budgeting as two things: pay yourself first and then pay yourself again. Basically, saving, as was mentioned earlier, should be looked at as a regular budget item. Consider it maybe like a debt. It's there every month. You want to put money away. As it was already said, make it automatic. For me personally, not only do I like to make my savings automatic, I like to take one extra step because I know what my behaviors are. And my emergency saving is in an institution that's different from the institution where I keep my checking account. So I have my one bank that I use for my checking and regular savings account activities. And then my emergency savings is over in my credit union account. That's just because it's a little bit further away. It's a little bit more effort for me to get, but just as easy for me to put money into through direct deposit. One of the other features I like to think about is to treat all money sources the same. We have a really bad habit, or many people have a really bad habit, myself included, to treat windfall money. My tax refund. Maybe I was lucky and won some money. Maybe I got a bonus, an unexpected bonus at work. Maybe someone paid me back some money that they owed me. And we tend to treat these special windfalls differently than standard income. And we don't necessarily think in terms of putting some of that away. My message is treat all income sources the same. So if your regular amount is a certain percentage of your income goes into savings, when you get that tax refund, if it's a stimulus payment, whatever payment you're getting, try to put something away. It's a really good habit to get into. Find extra money. Well, where do we find money? Maybe it's in the sofa cushions, but we also can find money by taking a moment and looking at where we're spending it. As you're going through your budget, and right now we have a really unique opportunity since we're limited on where we can go and what we can spend with the restrictions, the pandemic restrictions, we can kind of get a better view on how much we've truly spent in the past on gasoline, for example, or transportation or entertainment, and even groceries, to see how this pandemic restrictions have impacted how we shop. So when I say find money, I'm thinking at looking at your budget, looking at your spending and saving, and see if there's areas that you can make some reductions. Let's say you're getting ready to buy something new. Maybe you have to replace an appliance. I'm not saying run out and get one, but if you need something like that, to take the extra time to do a little bit better job at bargain shopping. Also, if we're looking at fuel efficiency or energy efficiency, if we're replacing something like a major appliance or an automobile, there's an opportunity for us to look at a more efficient model. Look at the things that you're regularly paying now. We have some time to sit around, read your cell phone contract. See if you're paying for things that you maybe don't need or don't use. Are you paying for a whole lot more data than which is you're regularly using, or you're not paying for enough so that you're incurring extra fees? I like to think of other kinds of offers that we may have opted into automatically. You know, you might have purchased something and you got 3 months free something or other with that purchase. If you don't actively cancel that, if you're not interested in continuing it, you're going to start getting charged for it after that initial free period. I mentioned here something like protect your property, but don't overprotect. Insurance is a fantastic thing. You want to protect your assets, homeowners insurance, renters insurance, car insurance, those kinds of things. But I was thinking specifically of items, again, that don't necessarily need that protection. Look at what your cars are being covered for. Talk with your insurance agent. See if there's some savings, because as your car ages, as the needs and the insurance requirements may change, particularly in the area of the comprehensive or the collision deductible. Also looking at things back like your cell phone. I'll be honest and tell you, one year I was happened to be reading my cell phone bill and I noticed I was paying monthly cell phone insurance on a phone I never even had anymore because I'd already switched. So take this opportunity to look at what you are paying for in protection. Increase where you need to, because there's nothing bigger on your hit to your budget is to be able to happen to replace an asset that could have been covered by some insurance. Pay yourself again. I mentioned earlier, treat your saving like any other debt obligation. Put it on the regular schedule. I say here, pay on time every time. And if you miss a payment, make it up. I like to try and think about my savings that way. But if you're missing too many, like a debt, maybe we're trying too hard. As Brandon mentioned earlier, we have to choose that amount that works for our budget. And just like other kinds of spending and other kinds of goals, sometimes we need to reevaluate. Sometimes we need to say, okay, this is not working for me right now. It's too much. If you're trying to save too much, that it's putting pressure on the other obligations that you have, we are more likely to stop saving. That's not what we want to do. Adjusting what your goals are, adjusting how you're getting there. So you're still going to get to the finish line, whether you take large running leaps or whether you take small baby steps. The idea is continue saving, even if it's just a little teeny bit. If you have to adjust it down, keep it happening. One of the other things I like to always do, if you get a raise or if you get a bonus or something changes in your income, maybe you've changed jobs, maybe you've changed positions at your office. If your income is going to change, before you see that change in your paycheck, go ahead and make a change to your automatic savings. If you're not, as Brandon mentioned, money that you don't see, you don't spend. So if you just put away a little bit more, you won't even notice that it's not there because your budget is already adjusted. Next slide, please. I also wanted to direct you to a couple of extra resources that we have. I know all related to Financial Literacy Month. If you are in a situation where you have students at home and you need more information, or you want to have them go through some activities for learning about managing their money during this Financial Literacy Month, I encourage you to take a look at Federal Reserve Education.org. That's our website where we have lots of free resources, educational, from grades K through 16, plus consumer information on managing your finances and other economic topics. I encourage you to take a look at that. In a previous webinar, I mentioned one of our resources called Building Wealth, which is a self-guided, whether it be workbook or online resource, to take you through the varying steps of developing your budget, looking at ways to save, looking at becoming a better consumer and managing our credit. All of these things help us get to our finish line. But basically, as a wrap-up comment, I mentioned earlier that personal finance is personal, and good personal financial habits and saving is a habit that you have to develop. The longer you do it, the more you do it, the more you practice, the better you're going to be at it. But keep it up. don't stop. It's going to pay off rewards in the end. And that's all I wanted to say right now, and I wanted to pass it on to the next speaker.
Awesome, thank you. This is Paula Dawson, President of Junior Achievement, and I'm excited to be speaking with you all today. I love all the tips, and I just wanted to share some information on predatory lending. And overall, in this entire topic, what we're going to be talking about in particular is identifying predatory lenders, types of predatory lending, and then alternatives to predatory lending. So just to kind of identify that, what is a predatory lender? That is someone that's loaning money, charging excessive fees or interest rates with little or no regard to the borrower's ability to repay the money. So it can be a big problem. So it's really time to take a moment and think about, if you're saving, there's great tips on saving and so forth, but making sure that you're armed and financially savvy to be able to identify financial predators is going to be critical. So some key factors in looking at who could be a predatory lender. Some things to look out for are high or interest rates, excuse me, or add-on costs. So if it's extremely high interest, and what that is offering a loan with little or no credit check. That is a huge red flag. If somebody's not willing to check your credit, and when you give them a loan, you need to get to that red flag. Rushed approval or getting paperwork in by a lender, you should have time to really sit through and read the fine print and understand what the terms of that loan could be. And then loan flipping. What that is when you get a loan and then they make it a little bit, they kind of entice you more with wrapping that loan up into another. Lots of hidden costs in there, so something to be very aware of with that. And an obvious one, but one worth saying, is if they're lying or trying to ask you to be untruthful, that's another red flag. So all in all, as far as identifying predatory lenders, you need to always ask for the loan disclosure information, read that fine print, and understand what you're getting yourself into before you do. So now we'll move on to the types of predatory lending. There are quite a few of them, so I'll run through those very quickly. One big one is the payday loan lenders. They don't care who you are. It's short-term, high-risk loans with extremely high annual percentage rates, and so that's one to be aware of. Pawn shops, where they're taking an asset, giving you money and holding that asset, which is often way more than the cost of the loan was. That's one to be. You will end up paying way more later down the road. Buy here, pay now, kind of like that auto dealership. That's very risky, because what you're doing is they're acting as the seller and the lender. So your best interest is not going to really be working for you there. And then finance companies, those are less regulated than the banks. So overall, with the types of predatory lenders, you need to just keep in mind, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And there are people on your side that will help walk you through that process, and much more dependable on knowing what to look for, and that would be more reliable in leading you into the right path of lending. So some alternates to predatory lending would be your banks and your credit unions. When you look at them, there are regulations they have to follow. They're a safer bet, and likely you have a bank that you're working with so that they understand what your accounts are and can kind of help you map through that lending process. And then another alternative is to utilize, as Brandon said early, many of you all said, is that 211 service. There are so many resources for health and human services that are available on the 211. So I encourage you to look at that and see what else you can get as a resource there. So you don't want to be trapped into predatory lending. Predatory lenders use unfair and deceptive practices that mislead people into taking out loans that aren't in their best interest. So some final tips that I would have for you all to make sure that you're safe from that: ask questions when taking out a loan, shop around, make sure you're getting the best interest rate you can, be an educated, read the fine print, avoid balloon payments, know your rights as a borrower, and don't hesitate to say no. If it doesn't look right, walk away from it. There will be other options. And that's all I have, and I can turn it back over.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the information you shared. I'd like to go now into the presentation for John Carpenter. John, again, is with Liquidity Development Alliance, and I'll turn it over to you now, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. I appreciate the opportunity. I want to really underscore basically what everyone has been talking about by pointing out that everybody that's been on this call has been a trusted advisor, in the sense that they have no financial interest in whether or not you save or don't save. And we think that having a trusted advisor is absolutely critical to anybody who is trying to build any kinds of savings reserve or to save over a longer period of time. So a trusted advisor could be a friend, a family member, could be your financial institution. Many banks, credit unions have savings courses and opportunities for customers, or a nonprofit housing counselor. And at Mid-City Redevelopment Alliance, that's who we are. We've been doing that for 30 years. We caution people to be wary of the internet. There are lots of promises and lots of scams, particularly around credit, which is kind of intertwined with savings. But we don't use the term credit repair or anything like that, because it's been sort of contaminated by the predators who talk a lot about credit fixes and credit repairs. The best way to find a credible housing counselor in your area is to simply Google HUD housing counselor. These are all HUD certified nonprofit housing counseling agencies. And they are the kind of people that can help you through savings issues. And also, again, they can help you maintain a reserve and build a plan and stick to a budget. Next slide. And another thing, and I think somebody said earlier, it's not what you make, it's what you spend. But sometimes it is how much you make, and a lot of times people are entitled to certain public benefits that they may not be aware of. So a nonprofit housing counselor can actually screen you to see if there are public benefits that you may be entitled to. We also strongly encourage the clients that come to us to reach out to other trusted advisors around tax preparation because of the earned income tax credit. That's a huge windfall for a lot of low-income families each year. Again, these are nonprofit 501c3 organizations who support and organizations that work with clients and families, and really should be seen as a trusted resource. Every American, well, maybe not every American, many millions of Americans will soon be getting checks from the federal government. A nonprofit housing counselor can help you figure out how to budget that. Is there any portion of that you can save? And they can help you with some of those tools. And some of those tools may be using the telephone and the web for your banking. You may have never done that before, but they're good tools to help trigger automatic payments of things and automatic transfer of funds into a savings account or multiple savings account even. So now's a good time to try those out, whether you have a reserve or not. And then finally, the most important reason why you want to reach out to a nonprofit housing counselor is they can help you set, maintain, and achieve all of your financial goals, whether it be an emergency reserve, saving for 3 months without income, whether it's about purchasing a home, understanding your rights as a renter. These are all the things that we do and that you can find out more about at our website, midcityredevelopment.org, or our phone number, which is 225-346-1000. We have someone who can talk to you today, or at least begin the process of setting up an appointment. So we hope you take advantage of the community resource that we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, John. Touch on a quick question since we'll have to condense our Q&A session for a moment. John, what would you say to someone who feels like their financial spending is very private and they're hesitant about going to see a counselor or getting advice or help? How would you convince them or provide them with information of the security of that?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, because we are a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, we adhere to all of their standards of privacy. And so we consider the confidentiality of a client's financial information the way a doctor would medical information. And so you meet only one-on-one with a counselor. We have strict protocols around sharing. We don't reach out on your behalf until we have your consent. And that's really about building trust, because we are not trying to make money off of you. We're your partner. And so maintaining that level of trust is critical.
Thank you, John, for that. I want to address this question to Carolyn Pemberton. Carolyn, you talked about the America Safe Pledge, but you also were trying to provide advice about going step by step, starting off small. What do you say to that individual who questions should they even try, since they right now in this COVID crisis, they don't have the $500 to get started with an emergency reserve?
Well, as I said, we believe strongly in the whole concept of starting small. So if there has not been an income loss in your household as a result of the COVID-19 situation, and you receive that stimulus payment, our recommendation would be to try to set aside a portion of that stimulus payment. I believe Claire alluded to that in some of her comments as well, when you get those windfall payments. And if you have had an income loss during this time, it may not be the best time to start your savings, but when your situation stabilizes, and again, start small with those, low amounts, $10 a month, $15 a month, something to get you into the habit. And as your situation improves and you look through your budget and find more money perhaps that you can save, you can increase what you're saving. So now may be the time when you can start to save, but it may not be. And you can start thinking about when your situation improves that you may be able to start that savings habit. And again, and just, to think about that stimulus payment, even if you have had an income loss right now, you could try putting a portion of that aside, because you might need something in the next 30 days if your situation doesn't improve in the next 30 days. And that, again, can help you get into that habit of saving. And it's just that small amount that starts to build the habit.
Excellent. Claire, just a very quick question on your end. What's better, to save the extra income or to pay off the debt? If they're looking at the extra $10 to $15, what should they do?
Well, the answer to that is it depends. It really depends on the debt. It depends on the condition of the debt. And again, this is a personal opinion. If I were choosing between saving my cash and paying down debt, if my debt was in good standing, if I had a balance that I was working on, I wasn't late, the payments, I was paying a little bit extra, and that particular obligation was moving along in the right direction, and I thought that I perhaps might need some access to some ready cash, my personal opinion is I would maybe do both. Add a little to my debt, but then keep some of that cash on hand, because if an emergency would happen, then I would have that easy access. I might also, depending upon how much money we're talking about, whether the debt or savings wise, might want to look and revisit that decision a little bit later down the road. So if I didn't apply all of that money to my debt, and if I had it in my account and I was doing okay, if I wanted to pay a little bit of it down, I would. But it really depend on the condition and the status of that debt before I made the decision with my savings fund.
Very good. And so for time purposes, I'll go to Paula with the last question. Paula, if a person is having a problem with their credit, or they have no credit or bad credit, but they're trying to get a loan, what should they do? You'll have to unmute.
Oops, sorry. So I think that's a great question. The main thing is credit score. Wanting to make sure that they build that up as much as possible, pay down their debt, and also reviewing that credit score for any errors. Often that's a problem that we're not aware of. And then limiting credit cards and so forth. Probably the best things I can share about that.
That's excellent. And actually, I'm going to go to the next slide, because that's such a great segue into what's up and coming, which is our last workshop, which is workshop number 6. I want to remind everyone on Thursday, it is about assessing spending habits. So ties really nicely to what you said, Paula, about looking at credit. We will have someone who's going to talk about credit scores and how to get free access to credit scores, especially since we're in this COVID season. We have individuals who will provide information on that. So again, workshop 6 is on Thursday, April 30th, assessing spending habits during COVID-19 and beyond, and a new normal for money management. The exciting part about this, and we save the best for last, we have a special guest presenter, Miss Susie Orman, who is a personal finance expert and renowned author. She will be with us as our special guest, in addition to Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome, who will be on the call with us. And all of our workshops can be found on the City of Baton Rouge Facebook page, which we have it live streaming, so you can go back and watch these. In addition, we have the information on the city's page, which is brla.gov financial workshop. Reminder to register. If you're interested in being a part of our last workshop, you can go to the link that's at the bottom. But we also encourage individuals, if you have time, to go back and watch the series that we have. The last slide is a personal thank you to all of our partners, especially those who are on the call today. We had a lot of information that we covered in this workshop, but I will tell you this was one of my favorites in terms of the knowledge that was shared, especially during this crisis time. And savings is so important, especially beginning with baby steps. I encourage individuals to look at their liquid assets, what Brandon talked about, taking the pledge and starting small, contributing maybe $10. I also love the information that George shared with us, CEO President of United Way, just considering your current situation and removing yourself from that struggle of paycheck to paycheck. I want to thank all of our partners, remind for registration, and please come back on Thursday to be with Susie Orman. And we look forward to seeing you again from 11 to 12:30. Thank you all for your support and your participation on this webinar. Thank you, partners.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Be safe,
everyone.
everyone.